Thomas because when I wanted to find out about the poetry scene on Staten Island, I asked a lot of people. And everybody said, well, go find Thomas. Ask Thomas. He does everything. He does workshops. He organizes things. He's won awards. You're going to love Thomas. So I made you older.
Yeah.
You were really.
Well, how old did you make me?
In your 60s.
Okay.
Now am I close? No, I don't want to
You're
ask
a little
you.
clouse. Yeah. I'm 46.
Oh, you're 46.
Yeah.
That's not close. You're 6. I've come to readings, open mics, and heard you. And I've looked at your poems on Instagram. And so some of your poems on Instagram have literally broken my heart. And they haven't been long poems. So I remember some poem you wrote about you have your mother's smile and she's wearing a scar.
I have my mother's smile and she has the scar to prove it.
So where did that poem come from?
Well, so thank you first for such a great introduction. So that poem, and like the Instagram poems, those Instagram poems are lines from bigger poems. So I'll just take a small section and turn that into something that'll have a little bit of a life of its own. What you're talking about is in a poem that I have called, this poem is about how I enter a room, and it's kind of like an origin story. I've had that line though for over 10 years, and I haven't been able to find a place for it until I'm gonna say I take this workshop with this great poet, John Sands. I don't know if you know who he is. He does these really great intensive workshops, and I wrote it, I would say maybe the end of 2022. Because I'm writing a lot, right? Like my mom passed in January. But prior to that, it's just been like, I was her only caregiver except for her boyfriend, and that's a whole other thing. So I've just been writing like crazy about my mom. I can't stop writing about my mom. It's becoming, I'm writing poems right now where I'm like, I need to stop writing poems about my mom.
I don't know why people have to stop. Do you?
Because there's also the artist at work, like of course, if it becomes a poem about my mom, I'm not going to stop that. I'm never going to stop it. But as an artist, you also want to ring some other bells. And after a while, yes, you're writing through something, but the artist in you, that other person in there, that other critical voice, if you want to call them that, is like, okay, but we want to go in another direction. And I have to learn how to write a different way, a different style of entering a poem. And I think if I could enter other ways and if I end up on my mom, that's great, because then you're starting somewhere and you're ending somewhere else. But as of right now, I'm just trying to get beyond that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I don't know how people get beyond one thing and enter a poem in another way.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you enter a poem, even
Yeah.
if it's a poem about your mother? Do you just get up in the morning and write a poem?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's many different ways that I enter a poem. My typical way is that I start, oh my God, I didn't bring it. I start with a small little brown book and I just write lines down. And then that goes to a bigger book, and then that goes to typing out. And that's one way that I just enter a poem, and, for some reason, the lines that I've written in that small little brown book, a lot of them just have to do with my mom. So I'm constantly entering it that way. But then there's other things that I try to do. I try to give myself, I try to create word banks that have nothing to do with, so now I'm going to make a word bank that has to do with planets. I'm going to do a word bank that has to do with, trying to get out of that space. I also very much I teach a course at Wagner College called Using the Internet as a Poetry Prompt. So I try to I do this exercise. I call it. I have these poetic scavenger hunts that I do. So I'll open a bunch of tabs online and I'll type in each tab everything that has to do with the color red, and then all these images come up with the color red, and then I could type in, nature, parks, mountains, all these images come up, and then I have all these 6 tabs, and I just start with tab 1, and I try to write a line from those red images, and then I move on to the next tab to try to write a second line, those nature images, but trying to keep in with the theme, trying to create something and trying to build a poem like that.
Kind of like metaphor dice.
I love metaphor dice.
I see.
So do I. I'm actually in the anthology. There's going to be a reading at Brooklyn Poets in July. I just got in the anthology, which I'm really excited. There's a metaphor dice anthology. And I use metaphor dice in my classrooms. I think it's incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
So you're talking about teaching with prompts, and when you do a workshop, do your workshop leaders give prompts?
It depends on who's leading. Like the John Sands workshop, Jenny Pisani, who just did a workshop for Fresh Kills, did this where we started with just a free write where there is no prompt, just write. The pen doesn't stop. Don't think, don't second guess yourself, just let it out. And then the second part of that will be a prompt, because free writing, and because I think that's a really smart way of introducing a prompt, because you get a lot out of your head. You're just doing a free write. So let's say I give you like a 5-minute free write. That pen does not stop moving, and then you introduce a prompt and your head is already in a different space. And I think when it comes to prompts, you have the educators who are stringent, like very stringent, like you have to do exactly what the prompt says, or the poetry gods will come down and damn you for all time, or me and like other people, like whatever happens, here's this prompt, maybe it'll take you somewhere, maybe you'll write about how much you absolutely hate the prompt, maybe you'll write about how much you hate me, whatever it is, like whatever it is, as long as that pen is moving and you're reacting to something, to me, that's a prompt.
When did you discover that you actually are a poet, not a novelist, not a short story writer? Or maybe you are a novelist and a short story writer.
I always started writing song lyrics when I was younger, and then I discovered E. Cummings when I went to the College of Staten Island. And I knew there's a poem, A Leaf Falls, I don't know if you've ever seen it, where it's like I was writing short stories and dabbling in that. So that's how I knew that, no, I want to be a poet. Like, I don't care, so that's how I knew that I wanted to be. Do I know that I am? I think that I'm still searching, I definitely follow my taxes poet. No, I'm just kidding. I just I don't know if there's a specific time that I knew that I was a poet, but I know that that time at CSI E. Cummings, that's what led me on that path. I also think another thing too is my brain, the way it works is I think it's wired differently. So when I process and read information and when I write information, I process it differently and I think about it differently. Like a poem to me is a lot easier to read than a novel. The novel feels too dense to me, and it could be many different things. It could be, my reading level, but I also think it's just about how I process information. And then when I spit that information back, when I'm writing, for some reason, it will not always come out linear, which I think is something that adds to the poem. I love non-linear texts. So I think when I found poetry, that connection really helped me. Just, novels and stuff like that never really appealed to me.
And what's an example of non-linear text?
So, I mean, there are so many interesting poems that I could think of. A poem that I could think of, I don't know if you've ever heard of Omar Homan. He has this great poem called Anatomy of a Prayer, which goes through, 2 different relationships talks about his mother, but it just goes all over the place. It's not like, there's no, and I know novels aren't like this either. I know novels aren't like point A to point B. But like, poems to me sometimes are like, point A to point D to point one to, like that doesn't have like a timeline.
Oh, but you mean the kind of the way the poem develops.
The way the poem develops, what happens inside you while you're reading it, you don't need to come to an answer. Like, you just need to, sometimes poems are just your it's a reaction. It's like a painting. It's like when you look at a painting, it's, I could look at this painting here or behind me today, and I can see something, and tomorrow, just like we were doing in the emails, I could see something else in a new day. And the same thing with poems. And like, I love that kind of craziness with them.
Oh, I'm so happy you said that.
Yeah.
Because I see different things on different days. I feel differently
Yeah.
on different days. And there is this thought, it's not really related to what we're talking about specifically, but they tell people when you go, for instance, for a job interview, right? The boss that is interviewing you could be having one mood one day and another mood another day, and that determines whether or not you get the job. So I like that diversity. I like
Yeah.
knowing that the world changes that rapidly, maybe
Yeah.
sometimes in the course of an hour.
Yeah, the weather you carry with you. Sometimes you're carrying a whole lot of sunshine. Sometimes you're carrying all these like storm clouds, and those weather forecasts affect how you're going to interact with people and whether you're going to hire them or, it's
Right,
yeah.
right. And isn't there something that you're part of that's weather media? What was that
Oh,
called?
so that's called Great Weather for Media. We do readings. We publish an anthology of 80 poets from across the country every year, and then we publish one author collection every year. So yeah, we've been doing that pretty steady for the past year. I think 13. What is 2020? Yeah, so around for about 13 years, I think.
Wow,
Yeah, we
that's
started in
great.
2010. Yeah.
So I think we talked a lot,
Yeah.
and I think that might be great to hear some of your poems now.
Sure.
I know I asked you to bring your favorite poems, and this might have something to do with, are these your favorite poems today, or?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll start off with the poem that you had mentioned with the smile thing, with the smile and the scar poem. I'll read that.
Okay.
I don't know what else. I might not read that much. Yeah. Are they my favorite poems today? I don't know. We'll see
Okay.
when they come out of me. This poem is about how I enter a room. I'm from ketchup sandwiches and cigarette smoke, pajama bottoms and broken insults, beer can teeth and three-limbed Care Bears. You could feel the broken on my one-socked feet. Dear barstool table, I won't know you for another 15 years, but I understand how it feels to always have something stuck to the base of you that has been in somebody else's mouth. Dear George Carlin, my mother introduced me to you at a very young age. You showed me that God was too slow in proving it was real, but you also made me laugh too. My mother was quite the comedian herself. When I was 3 years old, my mother drove her beige Chrysler like some sort of 80s midlife missile crisis and parked it on the lawn of the house where my father was having an affair and just left it there. I think this is how I approach all of my poetry. How do you create space without taking up too much space? Like the Chrysler, like this poem, like my beard. I am from my mother smoked cigarettes while I was in her tummy. God was a matter of fact, a matter of lungs digested. My poems, they laugh at me. I have now become the comedian. Dear God, why is your light always laughing at me. I am from C-section and needs more oxygen. How we open up depends on the arch of our backs and the blade. When they opened my mother up, they found me. I have my mother's smile, and she has the scar to prove it. All right, there you go. So that was that poem.
Yeah. Do you want to read another poem?
Yeah. This poem has only made it this far. Trying to dig your way out of this, you can fit 4 bodies and 2 cremation urns in here. Little baby spiders under the bed, the usual poetry with furry legs. The headstone, different ways to yawn, a cacophony of empty, cracking your spine to spite the page. The gatekeeping of nuance, the dye of the stone, the chiseling of dates, the power of the hyphen, Carex horizon long, adjuncts and their strings, the cursive it takes to remember the sleight of hand, little baby spiders under the bed. You could fit 3 more bodies in here. Don't remember a poem where I have been this happy. Can you hear the ducks? Are you listening for the ducks? It's not about listening, it's about bad puns and quacking. A shovel to the back of the dread. It feels to be asked, do you want to be buried this way? The rainbow burped from the croak of a frog. The science in the movie Fantasia. The shadows deep in a flower. Each poem is different. You could fit more than bodies down here. All right.
Thank you. So, and do you want to share your Instagram address with our viewers so they can look at the lines from your poems that way?
Yeah, sure. At Thomas Fucaloro, so ThomasFucaloro. Love saying F-U to the camera.
Thank you. And thank you so much for this
Thank you.
beautiful interview.
No, thank you.
Thanks for joining us in the Storytellers Lounge. You've been listening and watching Thomas Fucaloro. We'll be bringing you more interviews with poets, storytellers, artists, musicians, photographers, and possibly you if you'd like to join us. Just let us know in your comments.